In 1947, Bedouin shepherds navigating the arid limestone cliffs near the Dead Sea entered the Qumran caves and discovered thousands of decaying manuscript fragments. Among these leather and papyrus scraps were Aramaic copies of a text that had vanished from the Western world for over a millennium. These specific fragments, officially cataloged by archaeologists as 4Q201, dated back to the 2nd century BCE. They proved that the Book of Enoch was not a medieval forgery, but a foundational text widely circulated during the Second Temple period. Before the Qumran excavations, modern historians only knew of Enoch through later Greek translations, such as the Chester Beatty Papyri and a single complete version preserved in the ancient Ge'ez language by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The Ethiopian Church alone maintained the book within its official biblical canon, shielding it from the systematic eradication it faced in Europe and the broader Middle East. To understand why this text was preserved by some and hunted by others, one must examine its core narrative, beginning with the section known as the Book of the Watchers. Genesis chapter 6 contains a brief 4-verse anomaly stating that the sons of God mated with human women, producing a race of giants known as the Nephilim. Genesis provides no names, no motives, and no detailed mechanics of this event. The Book of the Watchers expands this fragmented memory into a comprehensive historical and cosmic record. The text grounds this celestial rebellion in a specific physical geography. It records that 200 high-ranking angels descended upon the rocky, snow-capped summit of Mount Hermon, located in the anti-Lebanon mountain range. The text provides a detailed hierarchical catalog of these entities. They were led by an angel named Simyaza. Recognizing the severity of crossing the boundary between the spiritual and mortal realms, Simyaza hesitated, fearing he alone would bear the punishment for the transgression. In response, the remaining angelic leaders, including Barakiel, Kokabeel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Danel, and Barakiel, bound themselves by mutual oaths. They swore conditional curses upon the summit of Mount Hermon, solidifying a pact to take human wives and execute their rebellion collectively. The interaction between the Watchers and humanity involved far more than illicit procreation. It was an unauthorized transfer of advanced, destructive technology. The text isolates an angel named Azazel as the primary architect of human corruption. Azazel instructed early human populations in metallurgy. He taught them how to extract raw ores from the earth and forge them into swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. Prior to Azazel's intervention, the text implies that humanity lacked the knowledge of mechanized, organized warfare. Azazel also introduced the extraction of antimony to create eye makeup, along with the cutting of precious stones and the use of coloring tinctures, deliberately introducing vanity and social stratification. Other Watchers traded different specialized knowledge for earthly access. Simyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, forming the basis of ancient sorcery and pharmacology. Barakiel taught astrology, while others mapped the weather patterns and the precise movements of the sun and the moon. The Enochic authors utilized this extensive catalog of forbidden teachings to explain the rapid proliferation of extreme violence and societal collapse in the antediluvian world. Human depravity was not depicted merely as an inherent biological flaw, but as the direct result of illicitly acquired celestial technology. The biological consequence of this intermingling was the Nephilim. The Ethiopian Ge'ez manuscripts describe these hybrid offspring as giants standing 300 ells tall, even if historians accept the alternative Greek manuscript reconstructions suggesting a height of 30 ells or roughly 45 feet. The physical reality described in the text is one of massive biological anomalies. The text records that these entities rapidly consumed all human agricultural yields. They stripped the land of its crops and livestock. When human labor could no longer sustain their massive caloric requirements, the Nephilim turned on the human population. The ecological devastation escalated as the giants began to slaughter birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, eventually descending into cannibalism and the drinking of blood. The earth itself is described as crying out against the sheer weight of this lawless brutality. Observing this global ecological and moral collapse from the heavenly realm, the archangels Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel petitioned God to intervene. The divine response outlined in the text is absolute, initiating a coordinated military and environmental purge. God dispatched the archangel Uriel to a human named Noah, the son of Lamech, instructing him to hide and prepare for a global deluge of water that would cleanse the earth of the Watcher's technologies. Simultaneously, God issued specific tactical orders to the remaining archangels to neutralize the angelic rebellion. Raphael was commanded to bind Azazel hand and foot. The text describes Raphael splitting open the desert in a desolate region called Dudael, casting Azazel into a deep chasm and covering him with heavy, jagged rocks to keep him in absolute darkness until the final judgment. Gabriel received orders to eradicate the Nephilim. Rather than destroying them directly, Gabriel was instructed to instigate a war of attrition among the giants, turning them against one another, so they would annihilate themselves in battle while their immortal fathers watched in helpless agony. Finally, the archangel Michael was commanded to bind Samyaza and the other leaders of the rebellion in subterranean prisons beneath the valleys of the earth for 70 generations. Following the imprisonment of the Watchers, the Book of Enoch shifts from historical narrative to cosmological exploration. Enoch is taken on a guided journey through the architecture of the universe. He witnesses the storehouses of the winds, the cornerstones of the earth, and the geographical locations of the underworld, known as Sheol. He describes a terrifying wasteland of fire where 7 stars are bound together like massive mountains. The angel Uriel explains that this is the cosmic prison constructed for the celestial hosts who transgressed divine law. Beyond its cosmological maps, the Book of Enoch served as a powerful ideological weapon during the Second Temple period, particularly through its astronomical book. In this section, Uriel reveals to Enoch a strict, unyielding 364-day solar calendar. This calendar divides the year into 4 equal seasons of 91 days. Most crucially, in this system, the year and every subsequent season always begins on a Wednesday. This was deeply symbolic, as Wednesday was the 4th day of creation in the Genesis account, the specific day God created the sun, moon, and stars. This calendar was not merely a tool for tracking time. It was the center of a severe political and religious schism. The official priesthood operating the Second Temple in Jerusalem utilized a 354-day lunar calendar. The sectarian Jewish communities, such as the one that authored the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, rejected the Jerusalem Temple's lunar calendar as a corrupt human invention that threw the religious festivals out of sync with the cosmos. By placing the 364-day solar calendar in the mouth of the patriarch Enoch and claiming it was delivered by angels? These dissident groups asserted that the temple priests in Jerusalem were violating the fundamental. The text also contains a highly structured historical allegory known as the animal apocalypse. In this dream vision, Enoch sees the entire span of human history, but the historical figures are replaced by animals. Moral purity and lineage are denoted by species and color. Adam and Seth are represented as white bulls, while Cain appears as a black calf. The Israelites are consistently depicted as a flock of sheep. The text meticulously tracks the geopolitical threats to Israel by representing rival nations as predatory animals. The Egyptians are portrayed as wolves, the Philistines as dogs, the Babylonians as lions, and the encroaching Greek and Seleucid empires as eagles, ravens, and kites. The animal apocalypse allows modern historians to date this specific section of the text precisely. The narrative tracks the destruction of Solomon's temple, the Babylonian exile, and the return to Jerusalem. It culminates with a clear description of the Maccabean revolt in the 2nd century BCE. The text describes a great horn sprouting on one of the sheep, which rallies the flock to fight back against the predatory birds. Scholars identify this great horn as Judas Maccabeus, the Jewish commander who successfully led the guerrilla war against the Seleucid Empire between 167 and 160 BCE, cementing the text origins in the turbulent politics of the era. Another critical evolution in ancient theology occurs within the section known as the Book of Parables. This text introduces a central messianic figure explicitly identified as the Son of Man. In earlier biblical texts like the Book of Ezekiel, the phrase Son of Man simply meant a mortal human being. However, the Book of Enoch elevates the Son of Man to a pre-existent divine entity, created before the stars, who sits on a throne of glory and executes the final judgment upon the corrupt kings of the earth. This exact formulation provided the theological template that early Christians later applied directly to Jesus of Nazareth. The influence of one Enoch on early Christianity was profound and openly acknowledged. The New Testament epistle of Jude directly quotes Enoch 1-9, stating, "Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all." The author of Jude attributes this prophecy directly to the historical Enoch, validating the text's authority. Early church theologians, including Justin Martyr and Origen, actively utilized the Book of Enoch in their writings, treating the account of the fallen angels as literal history. Despite its foundational status in the 1st century, the Book of Enoch was systematically excised from both the Jewish and Western Christian canons by the 4th century. Classical rabbinic literature fell nearly silent on Enoch, representing a deliberate institutional distancing from apocalyptic texts that fueled sectarian rebellions. In the Western Christian Church, influential theologians like St. Augustine recognized that the literal interpretation of Genesis 6 presented severe doctrinal problems. The concept that immaterial spiritual angels possessed physical bodies, experienced biological lust, and could successfully procreate with human women fundamentally clashed with the developing Orthodox doctrines regarding the pure, non-physical nature of angels. To resolve this massive theological conflict, church authorities adopted the Sethite hypothesis. This doctrine argued that the sons of God mentioned in Genesis were not angels at all, but merely the righteous human male descendants of Seth, while the daughters of men were the wicked female descendants of the murderer Cain. By redefining the actors as entirely human, the church eliminated the embarrassment of angelic reproduction. Consequently, the Book of Enoch which explicitly detailed the names, oaths, and physical actions of the fallen angels, was condemned as heretical. Stripped of its authority, the text was pushed to the extreme margins of the ancient world. It survived complete eradication only because it was sheltered in the isolated, high-altitude monasteries of Ethiopia and sealed inside the dry, dark caves of Qumran, waiting 2,000 years to force modern historians to reevaluate the origins of biblical history.